Our commander for this video is Krenko, Mob Boss. Krenko reads, tap, create X1 red goblin creature tokens, where X is the number of goblins you control. There are tons of goblins in Magic the Gathering, so what I've done is I've grabbed the goblins over here that I want you to look at in your collection, so when you're building your commander deck, you know specifically what goblins are going to help you play best when you're playing Krenko. So the first goblin that we have over here is a Goblin Instigator. When this enters the battlefield, we're going to create a 1/1 goblin token. So goblins that create more goblins. Next goblin we have here is a Horde Master. As this enters the battlefield, other goblins we control get +1/+1, essentially doubling the power of our goblins. Next we have a Goblin Chieftain. The Goblin Chieftain enters the battlefield and gives other goblins haste. So goblins that are haste enablers, specifically because when we have haste enablers, when Krenko enters the battlefield, we get to immediately tap Krenko and create those goblin tokens with his ability. We have a Goblin Pile Driver that, when you notice, says when he attacks, it gets +2/+0 until the end of turn for each other attacking goblin. So this is a goblin that's going to generate or present a lot of damage to our opponents by itself. And then we also have a Goblin Trash Master over here that allows us to sacrifice our goblins to destroy target artifacts. So in other words, ways for us to sacrifice our goblins to perform various tasks on the battlefield. So when you're looking through your collection, these are the general things that we want all of our goblins to be doing. Now, because we're playing the color red, we don't get to draw as many cards as other colors do. So throughout the entirety of this video, all we're going to go over to make this as simple as possible for you guys, and just to really drill this lesson into your brain so you understand when you sit down and play, you need to make sure that whatever you're doing, you're following a win condition. When we play goblins, we are essentially presenting win conditions to our opponents where we say, if you don't deal with this, eventually I'm gonna win the game. But the problem is that when you're presenting win conditions, you can present many win conditions at a time, and by presenting too many win conditions, generally our win conditions can be destroyed by a board wipe, or if a specific creature gets taken out, or if an enchantment gets put into play, it completely stops what we're trying to do. So if we have too many win conditions on the board and it all gets stopped, it can leave us in a position where we have no cards left in our hand. Krenko costs too much mana to play now, and then we just sit and we do nothing for the rest of the game. So the first win condition I'm going to present to you has nothing to do with Krenko. In fact, this is one of my favorite things to do, and I think when I'm playing against people that have Goblin Commander decks, it tells me that these people are much more experienced at playing goblins, with what I'm about to talk to you about right now. What I have over here, I'll call lightning rods, and I call them lightning rods because these cards over here can generate a lot of power or present a lot of damage to our opponents. This Bloodline Pretender gets +1/+1 counters as our goblins enter the battlefield. This one gets +2/+0 for each other attacking goblin. This one gets his power and toughness is equal to the number of goblins in play, and this one generally just can't be blocked. We also have a Pen and Blade that gives our goblins +1, that gives the creature +1/+1 for each creature that we control. And then this is a Bloodforged Battle Axe, which is a card that when we deal damage to our opponents, this is going to create a token copy of itself, and then we can take that token to equip to another goblin to present more damage to our opponent the turn after. Essentially calling these cards lightning rods because these creatures can generate serious amounts of power. So if our opponent has removal inside their hand, we're kind of forcing them to use their removal on our lightning rods on the board. And personally, we generally don't mind if our opponents use their removal on these cards, because if they use the removal on this, or they cast their board wipes while these are in play, that means that there are less board wipes and less things to do once we have Krenko on the battlefield. Because once our opponent has less removal, when we have Krenko in play, it's much more likely that Krenko stays safe and we can win through the main game plan, which is going to be through Krenko. Now, creating goblins in this deck is a win condition in and of itself, because we can play cards like an Impact Tremors, which allows us to deal 1 damage to each opponent as our goblins enter the battlefield. So what you'll notice that we have here are cards that just put other goblins into play. And I specifically really like Kiki Jiki inside this deck because I get to just tap Kiki Jiki, pick a goblin, and then if I chose the Beetleback Chief, I'll get 2 goblins as this enters the battlefield. The chief would go away, right? But I'll still keep the 2 goblins that it created. And if you'll notice, we don't necessarily need to have all of these different cards in play. So if I had a Beetleback Chief in play with Kiki Jiki, it means that when I have these cards in my hand over here, I don't need to continue to cast these cards. Just a Kiki Jiki, a Beetleback Chief, and Impact Tremors in play is enough of a win condition to, unless I have the opportunity to win the game and we need the extra damage, yeah guys, do what you want, do what makes sense. But if I'm just getting to the point where I want to deal incremental damage, just 1 card and another card that creates copies of that card is enough to present a win condition to my opponents. I don't want to just keep playing cards to play cards because then I'm left with nothing inside my hand. Buff our goblins. It's one thing if we're going to be attacking our opponents with 1/1 goblins. It's a whole other thing if our goblins are 5/5s, are 6/6s, and we're attacking our opponent with 12, 15 goblins. So looking at the cards that we have over here, all of these cards give our goblins +1/+1. So referring to what I said earlier about the goblins that create tokens, we don't want to be putting too many of these in play at one time so that we can use more later. This is a little bit different with this win condition because we want to make sure we have at minimum 2, at best 3 versions of these cards in our hand when we play. So it would look something like this. Let's say we had these 4 cards in our hand. We had a combo going earlier where we had Krenko, we were tapping Krenko and creating goblins and dealing damage with the Impact Tremors. That was the win condition we were presenting at that time, and we had these cards in our hand. Let's say somebody wiped the board and we lose all these cards. Somebody casts a farewell, we lose everything, and now we have these cards in our hand, right? That would mean that when we go to our next turn, let's just imagine we have enough mana to cast. We play the Goblin Chieftain, which is going to give other goblins +1/+1 in haste. We're going to play the Goblin King, which is going to give +1/+1 in Mountain Walk. We're going to get the Hobgoblin, which is going to give another +1/+1, and then the Horde Master, which is going to give another +1/+1. So essentially we have 5, 10, 15, 19 damage on the board in 1 turn that we can attack with immediately because all of our goblins have haste. 19 damage is half of somebody's starting life total, which means that I could then go to my next turn, use the rest of my mana to replay Krenko, tap Krenko immediately because he has haste, create a ton of other goblins that are all 5/5s, and I can just remove people from the game immediately. So when you're playing around the win condition or presenting the win condition of creatures with +1/+1, make sure at minimum you're playing at least 2, I would say at best 3 copies of cards that give your creatures +1/+1, because when you're creating these goblin tokens and you're attacking people with 4/4s and you're creating 4 of them or 5 of them at a time, dude, it really gets out of hand really fast. That, let's say we're not buffing our goblins, let's say we can't deal damage as they enter the battlefield. Well, we're not going to just sit here with a bunch of goblins and not attack our opponents. So we're playing cards like Hellrider. Dude, I love Hellrider. It's a great card. This says whenever creature you control attacks, Hellrider deals 1 damage to defending player. So if I'm attacking somebody with 20 goblins, somebody automatically takes 20 damage. Both of these cards essentially do the same thing, dealing damage to a player as our goblins are attacking our opponents. And then if those goblins are attacking and they happen to die because they're being blocked because they're just 1/1s, our opponents are going to take 1 damage either way because our goblins are dying. But notice specifically these 2 cards right here that says whenever a creature you control with power 1 or less, and this one says with power 2 or less, this specifically creates something we call a non-bow, a combo that doesn't allow something to occur, because if I have 2 of these goblins in play that both give +1/+1, that means that a 1/1 goblin would become a 3/3 goblin. So if I was to play this card after I created 3/3 goblins, both of these cards wouldn't trigger. So we're making sure that we're specifically choosing our win conditions with one another, because sometimes our win conditions can conflict with other win conditions that we have, and we're doing these things intelligently, meaning like we're looking at our hand, seeing what win conditions we're drawing into, and we're going to say, all right, this is the avenue we're going to pick right now, and just choosing things carefully. Now, when we play this commander deck, we want to make sure that we have combos that allow us to close out games. So we have a Phyrexian Altar and a Skirk Prospector here that allows us to sacrifice goblins and create mana. And we also have an Aggravated Assault as well that we can pay 5 mana into to allow us to untap all of our creatures and then generate an additional combat phase. So let's say that every time we tap Krenko, we created 6 goblins. So we're going to tap Krenko, create 6 goblins. With an Impact Tremors in play, each time we do that, our opponents are going to take 1 damage, right? We can then go to combat, get out of combat, sacrifice 5 of the goblins that we had created, which is going to generate an extra combat step. We're going to be left with 1 goblin over here. I get to then untap Krenko because of the Aggravated Assault. I can then tap Krenko again, creating 6 more goblins, right? Which is going to allow us to pass through this combat phase, deal the 6 damage with the Impact Tremors, and then sacrifice 6 or 5 of those goblins to generate more mana to then untap Krenko and do this all over again. We also can play a card like Goblin Recruiter. Goblin Recruiter just flat out wins games by itself sometimes. 2 mana. When it comes into play, search the library for any number of goblin cards, reveal those cards to all players, shuffle your library, then put the cards on the top of your library in any order. So after we cast this, we're going to grab 6 goblins. And the most important goblin we're going to be grabbing is Muxus Goblin Grandee, that says, when this enters the battlefield, reveal the top 6 cards of your library, put all goblin creature cards with gray mana cost 5 or less from among them onto the battlefield, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So essentially what we do is when we play the Goblin Recruiter, we grab Muxus. We need to make sure we grab a goblin that gives our goblins haste, and then any other goblin that you can find that are going to buff our goblins and make our goblins strong. But because they have haste, that would mean that we could then order these any way you want, but you need to make sure that as you order these, you put Muxus on the top, so that the next time you take your turn, you draw into Muxus, you then pay the 6 mana to cast Muxus, which forces us to reveal the top 6 cards of our library, which are going to be all the goblins that we grabbed earlier. And now all of these goblins enter the battlefield immediately. And because they have haste, any abilities they may have, they can all just attack immediately, and this can just one-shot people out of the game. You know what I noticed after making this video is that goblins can be so simple to play, but I could make at least 2 more videos of 5 keys to win with goblins. So if you enjoy this and you would like this to be a continuing series, please subscribe to the channel, because subscribing lets me know that this is something that you're looking for in the future. And 90% of the people that are watching videos on this channel are not subscribed to this channel, even though the majority of these people watch multiple videos on this channel. There are a lot of returning viewers. So that means you guys are just watching the channel and literally just choosing not to subscribe for months at a time. So I would really appreciate it if you guys subscribe, because if you did, I would have at least, if it was half that number, or even 10%, I'd have an extra 10,000 subscribers on my channel, which makes a huge difference in allowing me to make this my full-time job, which is something that I would really appreciate if you guys gave me the opportunity to do. So please subscribe if you like videos like this, okay? Whenever I end this video, I always say the same thing. Always remember, eat healthy, okay? Work out every single day. Most importantly, you guys gotta remember to believe in yourself. Good luck playing goblins, guys. Goblins are so much fun. Peace out, people.